Can I add a little thing to your introduction? I'm Mary's son-in-law, and she is such a force of nature, and I so admire her. For the first 6 months she was here, people would say, that's Jordy's mother-in-law, and it only took 6 months for me to become Mary's son-in-law. That is the power.
He is the world's greatest son. I had this carefully timed, and I should have known better. I've been in this organization a long time. I'm going to run over because I didn't allow.
Can't hear you. You have to put it close to your mouth.
Close to my mouth. Yes. There we go. I timed this, and I'm going to run over. But please feel free to stay for questions, and I'll do my best to speed along through this. In 1848, there was a lot of ferment in Seneca Falls, New York. The Quakers were splitting into two factions. The Whig Party was splitting badly, and eventually the Republican Party will emerge out of that. And into this ferment, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott decided to have tea. Lucretia Mott was visiting. She and Elizabeth Cady Stanton had met 8 years earlier in London, where they had both been attending, supposedly as delegates, to an anti-slavery conference, but they had refused to seat them because they were women. And the two of them had agreed that sometime, someplace, they would do something about the rights of women. So here, Lucretia Mott is visiting, they have tea, and letting no grass grow, they decided that the next week, on Bastille Day, they would call for a conference on women's rights. Elizabeth Cady Stanton sat down and wrote a document called the Declaration of Sentiments. It dealt with issues such as the right of married women to control property, the right of women to have custody of their minor children, the right of women to an education, but also in there was the extraordinarily radical proposal that women have the right to vote. This almost scuttled the whole thing, but Frederick Douglass, who was there, my slide, sorry, there we go. That is Elizabeth Cady Stanton. Frederick Douglass, who was there, came out in support. That rallied enough support that the Declaration of Sentiments, including the right of women to vote, passed, but Elizabeth Cady Stanton's own husband left town for the weekend in order not to be associated with anything so radical. Susan B. Anthony became a convert to the cause within 2 years, and she and Elizabeth Cady Stanton will form a very close friendship. Elizabeth Cady Stanton at that time had 3 children. Ultimately, she will have 6. This was very frustrating to Susan B. Anthony. And periodically, Susan B. Anthony would show up and babysit so that Elizabeth Cady Stanton could write editorials. Okay, right, editorials and speeches. They had this extremely close friendship for an extremely long period of time. Also involved early in the women's suffrage movement and also coming out of the abolition of suffrage movement was Lucy Stone. Lucy Stone also fought her entire life unsuccessfully to keep her maiden name. She was married to Henry Blackwell, and she had this enormous battle trying to enable women to keep their maiden name. So, Susan B. Anthony traveled around and spoke. Elizabeth Cady Stanton wrote speeches and editorials, and that's it. There were women's conventions, there were other women like Lucy Stone, and also like Sojourner Truth, who again came out of the abolition movement and is famous for the line, "Ain't I a woman too?" The Civil War started in 1860, and immediately all suffrage work was set aside. Many women threw themselves in the North, well, in the South too, into war work. Clara Barton was typical of the pattern of war work up until that time. She was single, she had money, she purchased supplies, she hired a wagon, she went off to battlefields. It was very much a personal effort. But there was something else going on in the Civil War, and that was the creation of what was called the Sanitary Commission. This was intended to be a male-run thing. It was intended to organize relief so that it would be systematic and not hit or miss. But very quickly, in a number of areas, women began to take over the efforts of the Sanitary Commission. There was a woman named Eddie Wittenmeyer who became the director of the Sanitary Commission in Chicago. The woman in black is Mary Livermore, and she was the head of the Sanitary Commission in Chicago. Now, these women became extremely frustrated because their war efforts were so hampered by the fact that they were women. Mary Livermore earned in one weekend at a fair, a massive fair that she held in Chicago, $50,000, which was an enormous amount of money then. But her husband had to countersign the check when she turned it over to the Sanitary Commission, because as a married woman, she could not write a check. These women who are in the Sanitary Commission, after the Civil War, are going to start moving into other areas of reform. They are going to have a very systematic, organized approach, and they are going to be very frustrated by their limitations as women. So, you might think, good, the war is over, we've got fresh blood, we're good to go, right? No. Congress passes the 14th and 15th Amendments to the Constitution in order to facilitate the freed slave in the South gaining their rights. And the 14th Amendment says, but when the right to vote in any election is denied to any male inhabitant, and then it goes on, and it uses that word male 2 more times. So this means that now we have a situation where